We back, mic'd up, team recap. Today we talking about Bills, Belichick, pitch. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing all right. That was a terrible intro, but speaking of all right, what are your thoughts on what Buffalo did in the draft?
Obviously, we've mentioned it for a couple videos for people trading draft capital to get veterans. They traded away their first round pick to get Stefon Diggs. I think that's exactly what they needed. They needed a true wide receiver one. They probably weren't getting it at the pick they were at. They probably could have got a decent piece, but not to the extent I think Stefon Diggs will elevate this team. I think they're in a win now mode. The division's probably the easiest it's been in a long time with Brady's departure. But obviously, I think that was a good trade for them. A little questionable with what DeAndre Hopkins got. Maybe if they, with the capital they put up, could they have got a wide receiver like DeAndre Hopkins? If so, they should have taken that deal. So I guess you could maybe question it there if you're doing more of a comparison. But I think with that second round pick, AJ Epineza, I think they got a steal. I think to get a player like that, he's probably he's a really good, really stout run defender at the DN spot. But as pure pass rusher, he's good. He's not great. So maybe it's definitely later than he should have went. He probably should have went late first round, early second. But a solid pick. I think perfect for what this team is looking for. And then Zach Moss, I think for the pick that they were there, I think to get a kind of a compliment to Singletary, I think it's a good pick. I think it's a solid pick all around, a solid back. I like the picks. I don't think that they're necessarily, it's going to throw this team to the next level, but I think they were solid picks and solid value at where they were picking.
No, I think it's an interesting draft. I'm not as on board with it as you are. Obviously, you got to love the Epinesa pick at 54. Considering at a couple points during kind of the draft process, people thought he might be a top 10 prospect. So I didn't love him there. I thought that he really lacked those pass rush capabilities up there. But to get him at 54, that is, to me, really one of the steals of the second round. The only thing I kind of question is that necessarily what you needed? We'll cover the defense and the rest of that defensive line later. But I kind of wonder the fit there in terms of, I feel like they're kind of lacking a pass rusher, and you almost got the antonym of pass rusher in AJ Epinesa. In terms of Zach Moss, I don't really mind the pick personally. I wasn't a huge fan of him on film. Obviously, like you said, he's a compliment to Singletary. The only thing that I wonder is he almost too much of a compliment? And you're probably like, what the heck are you talking about? Well, like when you think of Chicago with David Montgomery and like Tariq Cohen, they run literally a 50-50 snap split to where when Montgomery's in the game, they're running the ball, and when Cohen's in the game, they're passing the ball. I'm almost worried that they might have a similar duo here where with Moss, that he's just going to be that short yardage inside run guy, whereas Devin Singletary is going to be the more third down running back, get the ball in space and try and make plays. And I feel like that can almost hurt your offense in a way because you become more predictable, So I don't necessarily love the pick. I'm not a huge Zach Moss fan. Maybe if it was one of the better backs in the class, I would be more on board with it. But Moss just really wasn't my guy. And really, the only other pick that I wanted to talk about that I thought was really interesting, I guess, was the Jake Fromm selection at 167. I feel like a lot of people thought that he should have been in that late third, early fourth round in terms of where he was picked. And to get him at 167, that's an absolute steal. You think of Josh Allen, and sometimes he's a guy who is a little bit reckless, especially when running the ball. He'll hold the ball for too long, stand in there and take unnecessary hits. And we even saw Matt Barkley play 2 games last year. I think that getting a guy like Fromm, who maybe he'll never be a starter, unless there's an injury, God forbid, but I think that he could be a solid career backup almost for this team. And it's a good spot for him considering there is a chance that he'll actually get to play here in Buffalo.
No, I'm totally with you there. I thought the same thing when I saw that pick. When you have an aggressive quarterback, I think you need to be kind of aggressive with the backup quarterback spot, and I think that's what they did here. And I wouldn't even say a 5th-round pick is aggressive. They likely weren't making the roster anyway, and I think Jake Fromm has a really good chance of making this roster.
No, I definitely agree with that. So from there, are you ready to get into the offense? Or
Let's get it.
So, first off, Mike, obviously, there's not a bunch of changes, but there is one really substantial change. You already mentioned Diggs. So what kind of impact do you think Diggs will have on this offense next year?
I think it's huge. I think having that true wide receiver one is going to do wonders for this team, wonders for Josh Allen. I think that's really the question. As we saw some moments last year that Josh Allen looked like, wow, I can see it. I can see he eventually becoming a Pro Bowler. I'll say Pro Bowler. I won't say All Pro. He ain't that, not even close there. But then other times you're like, how does this man even have a job in the NFL? So inconsistency was obviously a problem with him. So I think getting him a wide receiver like Diggs, kind of just that scapegoat, like when things go wrong, throw it to Diggs. Maybe Diggs can make a play, and it's not just necessarily on the arm of Josh Allen as it has been before, or his ability to make plays. I think that's going to be huge. I think it's going to do wonders for this team.
No, and when we talk about Josh Allen, really, the one kind of problem with him is that he's not a super accurate guy, and you kind of question, like, oh, can he throw people open? And Stefon Diggs doesn't really need you to throw him open. He'll get open on his own because he is such a crisp route runner, and he can really do it all. He can play the underneath game. He can take the top off the defense. And now what you're also doing is you're putting the John Browns and Cole Beasleys into kind of those secondary and tertiary roles where I think that they're better suited. So I think that that'll take a lot of pressure off Josh Allen, off the rest of those receivers, and even in a way off that offensive line. They're bringing back the same five as last year, but if you're having a guy who's getting open quicker, more consistently, then they're probably going to have to cover up their men for less time. So I think it's just going to be all around really solid acquisition that's going to impact everybody really well. So other than that, is there anybody that you think maybe Diggs' presence is going to help break out besides Josh Allen, or do you think that really kind of what you see is what you get with the rest of this team?
I think it's a lot to see what you get. I guess I'm interested, you being an offensive lineman yourself, your thoughts on this front five.
Well, I think that there is a lot of value in bringing everybody back and having that familiarity, but really, I'm not a big fan of Feliciano. I actually do like the other four guys. I like having the young tackles who can cover up those edge rushers, but like having veterans in Quentin Spain, Mitch Morse, I think that it's a really interesting combination. The only thing that I would offer is you do have free agents out there like Larry Warford. I feel like we bring him up in almost every video, but every team seems to have holes at guard. So I think that would be a really interesting signing that could really not only just improve this run game, but improve your entire team as a whole. But as it is currently, I don't think it's an elite offensive line, but I think that it's solid and it's enough to where as long as Josh Allen doesn't hold on to the ball for an absorbent amount of time, that they can get the job done,
Yeah, I think that, and you kind of took the words out of my mouth. I think Josh Allen, a lot of times if you look at stats, maybe some sacks were let up that weren't necessarily the offensive line's fault, but Josh Allen's fault. Kind of indecisive, trying to make a play that wasn't there. Sometimes you just got to throw it away, and sometimes he was trying to make a play that simply wasn't there, and he just probably should have thrown the ball out. So I think that'll also help. I really hope Josh Allen, we see that progression, and we can see him take that next step, because I think that's really what this team is waiting on. I think that's what it needs.
No, I agree. And the only other guy that I really wanted to talk about in terms of maybe who I think could break out would be Dawson Knox, the tight end, actually. I think that he showed some really interesting stuff really late last year where it's like on some plays, he looks like he could develop into a top 5 tight end potentially, but then on other plays, he's kind of drugged down by Allen's really refusal to check the ball down and whatnot. So I think that as long as Allen is willing to kind of target him more and more frequently, that I do think that he has all the traits to really maybe take the next step. And I don't want to say he'd be like this next year's Darren Waller, because I think that was a crazy jump. But I think that he could make a jump into maybe the top 10 tight ends in the league, especially now that they do have Diggs who can kind of just spread that field and really make everybody's job easier.
For sure, but I think we both know the strength of this team is on the other side of the ball. I'll start off talking about this front four. I think a lot of this is based off, is Ed Oliver going to play? Or I think he is going to play, but when is he going to play? I think a suspension is inevitable. I think that after his charges, I think it's going to happen. So Ed Oliver kind of is the foundation piece. Obviously, that was what you were hoping to see, him take that next step. Obviously, we saw some promise. He got the pressures. Necessarily couldn't get the finishes last year, but we really need to see him develop. And now it's kind of delayed with the suspension that's likely coming with him. But I think good pieces around Ed Oliver. I don't think great, though. They really could have used maybe one more foundational piece that can really make a difference. I think they have a really good rotation going at both positions. But the issue is some of those starters probably should be on the back end of the rotation, not on the front end. And I think that's what the problem is. But they're definitely going to be rotating players in at those positions, and maybe just keeping fresh legs in there might help that front four really kind of show up.
No, I agree. My only concern with this front four is, as you said, there's a lot of solid pieces, sure, but who is going to be that guy who really takes the next step and becomes like a double-digit sack guy, or even who's going to come close? If Ed Oliver doesn't play, and now having lost Jordan Phillips, having lost Shaq Lawson, you your next highest sack producer is Trent Murphy at 5. That's not really ideal to me. And if Ed Oliver does play, he also had 5 last year as well. So it's like I don't see a consistent pass rush coming from any one individual guy. Maybe not a consistently dominated pass rush, but I do think that you have a lot of pieces that could make maybe splash plays every now and then. So it's just an interesting group. I just wonder if, as I was kind of saying with that Epinesa pick, I do wonder if they would have been better off either investing somewhere else, maybe at that linebacking core, or for someone who is more dynamic as an edge rusher, because I do think that that's where they need help the most. Obviously, we know that Ed Oliver and Starla Tulele and even like Mario Addison, like they are solid as run defenders. So I feel like Epinesa is almost just building on your strength, whereas they needed to almost upgrade that weakness, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. But I will also say they have a lot of really nice talent on that back end of that team. Tremaine Edmonds, I think, really showed up last year, and I think he's only going to make more steps. He had the athleticism. He was really raw coming out of college, and I think he's starting to really kind of see the game for what it is and slow that down a little bit. And I think that is going to speak wonders this year. And obviously, a player I'm a little bit more higher on than you are, but Tre'Davious White, he's an elite corner. He really is, man. He's that lockdown. He's going to take a wide receiver one, not necessarily out of the game when you're following the wide receiver ones, but he's definitely going to make it a battle. I think every week against wide receiver ones, it's going to be one of those matchups to watch. So I think that's a player that's going to be huge. And I think a pickup that they had this year, Josh Norman, I think it was a really nice, solid pickup. He's back to where he belongs as a number 2 corner. I think he could really do wonders at that spot. Obviously, you saw what Josh Norman was against wide receiver ones when he was with the Redskins, but you're putting him back to some comfort. He obviously doesn't have the role that he had prior, where he was underperforming. So I think this is a really good spot for him to land, and I think it's going to do a lot of good things for this team.
No, I agree, and don't frame it as if I'm some Tre'Davious White hater. I think that he's a top 5 corner in the NFL. I just wouldn't go as far as say that he's number 2, as you seem to like to say. I would still personally take like the Casey Haywards and Richard Shermans, the more proven guys, or even Pat Pete is right there as well. The more proven guys who maybe aren't targeted as much, because I do believe Tre'Davious White was targeted like 84 times last year, and he only got up 47 receptions, sure, which is around 55% maybe, but he still is getting targeted a lot, and for a reason. I do think that the addition of Josh Norman is going to be super interesting because, as you said, now he's kind of back to, I don't want to say where he belongs, because at a point in time he was one of the top corners in the league, but for kind of where he's at now, he definitely belongs as number 2, And I think that on a team where you're really surrounded by a plethora of talent, not only in Tre'Davious White, but in that safety duo as well, I think this is a spot where he could thrive and really see a career resurgence. And, to touch on that safety duo, I'm not sure that there's many better in the league. I think that it's hard to say that that's not a top 5 duo, just because obviously Hyde, he's been one of the most underrated players in the league, despite being a consistent producer for the last 4 or 5 years. And then Jordan Poyer, he's been kind of slept on as well. He's more of that prototypical strong safety in the box, can make plays in the run. And he's been a guy who has almost filled in for that linebacking core in terms of getting over 100 tackles, So he's super active there. As you said, Tremaine Edmonds, he's going to continue to take the next steps. I just think that they have a lot of really solid pieces in that front 7, as well as an elite, really back 4. So I'm excited to see where this team's defense takes them next year, because I'm a little bit hesitant to say that they'll be like a top 5 unit, or I think that they could find themselves in the top 10. But it's just an interesting case of playmakers at every level, but then how good are the guys in between,
Yeah, and this real quick, I'm apologize for bringing up an argument that was already previously said, but kind of my White argument with the corners you mentioned. Tre'Davious White did what he did with the pass rush he had. You look at Richard Sherman, had the 49ers front line. You had Pat Pete, had Chandler Jones. You have Casey Hayward, Ingram, and Bosa. Tre'Davious White put wide receivers on an island, as we put it, on lockdown, or quarantine, as we put it now in 2020, with the pass rush he had. So I think that speaks a little bit of volume. So I just wanted to boost him up a little bit more. But if you don't have anything else to say, or you have nothing else to say about these players, we can get in the schedule.
So Mike, I'll ask you right away. Obviously, Vegas might be disrespecting the Bills a little bit in your eyes. You kind of mentioned that before we came on. They have the win total set at 9, while New England's is set at 9.5. So Mike, where do you kind of fall on this in terms of Buffalo stacking up against the rest of the division here?
Yeah, I think they're probably my favorite to win the division. They are my favorite to win the division. So I think the schedule it's not too bad. It's not on the easiest side that we've seen, but it's not on the hard side we've seen. I think there's a lot of really good matchups that I think are going to show up for this Bills team. I don't think they can beat teams like maybe the Chiefs or the 49ers. I think that's probably a little bit out of their league, but I think teams like the Rams, the Raiders, Titans, Seahawks. I apologize for just rambling off games you might be talking about, but they all should be really competitive games, and it'll really speak a lot to where this Bills team actually is in their development. Are they kind of knocking on the door of being a true competitor, or are they kind of phonies? Last year was a little bit fluke, and they're really jokes.
No, I agree. I think that they are probably my favorite to come out of the division, but that doesn't really say much to me because this is, in my opinion, the weakest division in football really by far. So what I'll be interested to see is in terms of just specific games, it's going to be like week 5 against the Titans or week 14 against the Steelers, because those are teams that are, I don't want to say proven in a sense, but we believe that they are good teams. We think that the Titans have an interesting defensive unit alongside, kind of a suspicious offense, but that'll be a good matchup. Whereas the Steelers, obviously, they were vying with the Bills for those wild card positions last year, but now, hey, oh yeah, you got Ben back, you got Juju and James Conner back fully healthy, along with some additions elsewhere. So I think those will be really interesting games to see kind of how has the Diggs addition put the Bills over the top, if it has put them over the top, and really how is their defense holding up? Was last year a fluke where they overperformed, or are they actually one of those top 5, top 10 units? I think those will be two really interesting games to kind of provide like a litmus test, for a benchmark of like where this team is at next year. So those will be really interesting in my opinion. Do you have any like specific ones that excite you, or is it just every game seemingly that you rambled off?
Yeah, I think those are two games that like probably test the upside. I just like maybe like games they probably should win. I think maybe the Chargers and Broncos. I think those are both interesting matchups. I think the Bills should win those games. I think based off not off talent, maybe just more of having experience. This team is a little bit more has a little bit more vets on the team, on the squad, and I think maybe Josh Allen. I think obviously he is the most proven quarterback out of all three of those teams, and I think that's really maybe it's more of a question of I want to see those games for Josh Allen's sake. Where is he at?
No, and if you want to keep tabs on us per se, make sure you guys are subscribed. Make sure that you're liking the videos, commenting, and really letting us know your feedback, any questions, comments, concerns, points of discontent. We'll answer anything. We love to have a conversation in the comments. So, usually we say if you guys have a team that you want us to do next, comment them and we'll push them to the front of the list. But outside of the Patriots, Jets, and DC Defenders, I don't know who else we have, Mike. So if somebody comments DC Defenders, what are we doing next?
We will not be doing the DC Defenders. What we will be doing after this, give you a little sneak peek for all you true fans out there. We are going to be doing a top 100 list of our players, which hopefully will open up some controversy. So we'll get some more comments on what you guys think. But just a little sneak peek. Just want to throw it out there.
No, for sure. You'll get to see what some guys like Stefon Diggs and Tre'Davious White, what makes them as good as they are. But that's enough for kind of revealing the list. With that being said, Mike, do you have anything else to add, or are we out of here?
I think we mic'd up and we mic'ing out. Deuces.